Wait a minute, please.
No, we're already recording.
No, well, you just have to wait a minute.
No, we're recording.
Find something out. No, it doesn't help.
Are you looking up how to stop a chair squeaking?
Yeah, listen to that.
They won't be able to hear that.
It's the squeakiest chair I've ever had the misfortune to find myself sitting on.
Well, I'm really sorry.
And I've sat on a lot of squeaky chairs in my time.
I bet you have.
Have we really got to do the whole podcast like this?
Sit still.
I can't sit still. I'm excitable.
Have you seen what I've got for us to play with here?
This is the podcast, you realise. They're not going to see what we've got to
I know,
play
well,
with.
you've got to describe it in audio, haven't you? Oh, I've lost my missile for that one.
That's a Shadow Interceptor from UFO. That's Captain Scarlet's car. What's that one? That's Spectrum.
The MSV.
Yes.
Maximum Security Vehicle.
Nice. How old are they?
They're dinky. 60s.
Are they?
But look at the underside of the saloon car.
It's signed by... It's upside down, Jamie.
Oh, sorry. It's Dad's
Gary
Gary Anderson. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, amazing.
He got it signed by Gary Anderson.
Yeah, it's good, isn't
I'm a
it?
big fan.
Anyway,
Great.
So we can play with these when we're,
in a
not
dull
paying
moment.
attention.
Yeah,
of
lovely.
which there will likely be many.
How
anyway,
dare you.
shall we get on with podcast 17?
That's how excited I am.
Brilliant, Richard. Here we go then.
This is Shane Rimmer, and you are listening to the Gerry Anderson Podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's get started. Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
The Gerry Anderson Podcast with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
I'll put the toys away.
Oh.
We can play with them later, because
Okay.
we're also doing Fab Live tonight.
Yeah, we are, yes.
I
But they don't know that yet, because that was last week, so
I know.
we can't talk about
Do you
that.
think that's a problem if people know that we're in a week?
Yeah,
Okay, let's not talk about
because
that.
they might think it's on tonight.
It's going to
It's
be
on
very
last
confusing.
week. Yeah.
Anyway, no, this Fab Live was last week.
Yes.
And this is Pod 17.
Yes, that's right.
And we're in the same room, Richard.
I know, it's quite strange, isn't it? I don't remember... In Fab Live, though, I didn't have this very squeaky chair, did I?
No,
remember you had the squeaky one, and I had the really quiet, comfortable, ergonomic one.
I think we both had wooden chairs, actually.
And
but...
remember you plied me with drink all evening, didn't you?
Yeah.
And food. Do you remember that? You laughed at all my jokes.
I plied you with cheese, for
Yeah.
sure. Anyway, people who watch Fab Live don't necessarily listen to the podcast
No,
and vice versa. But
that's true.
if you did,
Yeah.
do drop us a line and let us know.
Let us know how it went.
At gerryanderson.co.uk to see if you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Anyway, look, we're in the same place,
Yes.
which is a pleasure.
It is. Yeah, it is, isn't it? I can see you there in your TV Century 21 Adventure in the 21st Century t-shirt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I can see you there in your...
Well, my
Jumper.
Marks and Spencer's
Brilliant.
jumper.
Okay, good. So what's coming up, Richard?
Well, we've got all the usual stuff. We've got viewers' emails, of course, listeners' emails. We've got listeners' emails, of course. We get them every week. We've got news. We've got Chris Dale and his amazing randomizer.
Yeah.
Which is always good fun.
Let's hope it's not Torchy again.
No, I know he does something a little bit better this week, doesn't he? Bit
right.
more space bruising, perhaps.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
And then, of course, we've got another fantastic interview. Who do we have this week, Jamie?
Well, a name which some of you will know and some of you won't.
Right.
Phil Plait.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, we made some jokes about the name. I mean, jokes is
Gentle mockery.
charitable.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, but Phil is an astronomer.
Say that again.
Phil is an astronomer
Right.
and science communicator and does various things.
I hope he's a better science communicator than you are.
Hopefully, yes. He writes for
Astronomer.
Sci-Fi Channel's blog. He's a big Space 1999 fan.
Ah.
And I had a very long chat with Phil about Space 1999 and other Anderson shows, including the science of various things, his favourite episodes,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
Right. And are they? I mean, does the science stand up? Is that his?
No, I mean,
No.
basically the summary for blowing the moon out of Earth's orbit is it's not the problem getting out of Earth's orbit,
Yeah.
it's getting out of the sun's orbit.
Yeah.
And the amount of explosion, the size of atomic explosion required to do that would vaporise the moon.
Right, yes.
So, unfortunately, not possible. But he does come up with some other potential ideas for how it could happen.
Excellent. So we could still blast the moon out of Earth's orbit.
Yes.
Great, okay.
Which would be happy news for any Space 1999 fans.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you're definitely going to enjoy that, Space fans. And actually, anybody who's got a vague interest in science at all.
Yeah.
And also, it's nice to have an American fan on the show, because normally we've got Brits. So to have somebody who's seen it from the other side of the pond, and from the other side being the science side.
Indeed, that's right, yes.
So Phil coming up later.
Great. Yes.
Do you know what we forgot to do?
Introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's still silly. Did we really have to do this?
Yeah, I think we do, because somebody might be here for the first time.
That's true, they might. Well, I'm Richard James.
Good, and I'm Jamie Anderson.
There you go, should we move on?
Yeah, this is the Gerry Anderson podcast.
Oh, yes, we should say that as well.
I mean, Benji says that up front on the on the theme tune, which people keep asking for as an MP3.
I know. Well, Jeff Owen, for example, got in touch on Twitter. We love to see your tweets, so you can hashtag us Gerry Anderson Podcast. He said, been listening to pod 3 of the Gerry Anderson Podcast all those weeks ago.
Months ago.
Yeah, loved the chat with Sophia Miles. Keep giving us good guests like this, and this will be a fantastic podcast going forward. Well, that's the intention, isn't it?
We've had quite a few other good guests, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Like
Lizo Mazimba.
Yeah, Gary Newman.
Lee Sullivan.
David Graham.
Chris Packham. Shane Rimmer.
Oh, I've forgotten the rest.
Come on.
Wayne Forrester, who we don't actually mention very much in these.
Isn't
we should
that
mention
strange?
more. Yeah,
we really should.
And Wayne gave a great interview.
Yeah, you had a lovely lunch with him, didn't you? Yeah.
It's all about the lunches.
Jeff then goes on to say, as you say, Jamie, by the way, the Gerry Anderson Podcast theme tune is my new favourite thing to listen to in the car. I so need that as an MP3 on its own. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to do something about that in due course, won't we?
Absolutely, by popular demand.
There was
yes.
an extended version as well, which Benji did. So maybe we'll put that out.
With lyrics? You and I singing along?
There's no lyrics.
Karaoke style? I'm sure we could write some.
Okay, fine. That's a challenge for... we'll do that before podcast 50.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's not so very far away, to be honest. So we do love to see your tweets. You can get in touch with us, of course, via the email, which is podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk.
Well remembered.
Yeah, thank you very much. You can tweet Jamie. I'm Jamie Anderson. You can tweet me, Richard N. James, or Gerry Anderson TV, or various Firestorm places that...
we'll talk about Firestorm in a bit, obviously, in the news, I would think.
And in the meantime, do remember, you can rate us, share us, review us.
Screenshot us.
Yeah, subscribe to us. All the stuff that we go on about every week. But it is very important. It's great for us to read your reviews. We'd love to see what you think. So that's about the size of it for this pod. It's exciting, isn't it?
It's very exciting. What could make it more exciting?
Right, well...
Some news?
Oh, yes, of course, always. If it's exciting news.
Well, maybe. I mean, it is for fans of a couple of shows.
Okay.
So let's go over to Gordon.
Okay, here he is.
Hi, Gordon Tracy speaking. It's time for the Gerry Anderson News.
It's normally the bit where you go, newsy news,
Yes.
newsy news.
Well, I can say that now then, can't I?
Well, I've just done it, but go on.
You've stolen my thunder.
Go on.
Newsy news.
Yeah, there's lots of news. Thank you, Richard.
Love a bit of news.
First up, Joe 90 fans.
I
think we mentioned this last week, but in case you are not...
Sorry, is my chair putting you off?
No, I don't know what's putting me off. We definitely mentioned this last week, but in case you weren't already aware somehow by not listening to last week's podcast, or maybe you skipped over it or something, Joe 90 on Blu-ray, Volume 1 out now, available exclusively from Network Distributing at networkonair.com. It looks beautiful, and there's an amazingly hilarious trailer.
Is there now?
Yeah. On the Gerry Anderson YouTube channel. Obviously shows off how beautiful it looks, and it really does look stunning. Joe 90 has never, ever, ever looked better. But yes, they talk about how, a more child-friendly series came to pass after Captain Scarlet, and then you see all these explosions getting shot. And,
was it really that child-friendly?
Yeah, well, not really, no. But it looks amazing. Network have done a fantastic job. More volumes will be out soon, but I strongly suggest you go and buy a copy from networkonair.com immediately. You won't regret it, and it looks so good that it actually makes me want to watch Joe 90 more, which, as you know...
well, that's going some, isn't it? Yeah,
nice.
It's
that's something.
Yeah, isn't it?
So I will be hopefully getting a copy ready soon, and I've got my Blu-ray player standing by right here, ready to watch it.
Excellent.
Anyway, moving away from child-friendly things, or not, to Terrahawks,
Oh,
Richard.
yeah.
We know there are lots of fans of Terrahawks.
There are certainly lots of fans of
And
Terrahawks.
if you're listening right now and you're shaking your head going, oh, Terrahawks, just stop for a minute.
Bear with us. Mm-hmm.
Bear in mind what I've done for Joe 90, as in, I hated Joe. I found Joe frustrating, and I've thrown myself back into Joe 90.
You've learned to embrace your inner Joe.
Yeah, I've given him another try, and actually I found stuff that I quite like in there. So if you're there going, oh, I can't stand Terrahawks, it's rubbish, just for me, please give it a try.
Yeah.
In the coming weeks, we're going to put up some free episodes on YouTube in HD, so you can give it a try there, free of charge. You know, all we're asking for is a bit of your time. Definitely try some of the Series 2 and Series 3 material, I think, is the thing to say. Anyway, look, 1010 is a Terrahawks catchphase, right? Meaning affirmative.
Yeah.
So the 10th of October is 1010. So obviously that is International Terrahawks Day.
Of course it is.
It's not been officially
Now.
called that before, I think. Fans have unofficially said that quite a lot, but I think we need to embrace 1010
Great.
and really celebrate Terrahawks Day. So if you are in London on the 10th of October between 11 and 12:30, that's in the morning, Zelda, the one and only Zelda
herself,
puppet, the original Zelda puppet,
really?
is making an appearance at London Olympia. London's Olympia? How do you say it?
I think London's Olympia sounds better, doesn't it? Especially if it sounded like this. Say, London's Olympia! How's that?
It's like in your best X Factor voice.
Yeah.
Fine. Zelda is appearing at
London's Olympia!
yes, on the 10th of October. She'll be at Brand Licensing Europe. Which
right. Doesn't really roll off the tongue,
No,
does it?
it's BLE. It's it's an industry event, but you can register for a free ticket, get in free of charge. Just search Brand Licensing Europe on your search engine of choice.
Yeah.
Get yourself a pass, turn up there, come to the Lark's Head Media booth, where I will be with Judy Priest, original puppeteer on the series, and the original Zelda puppet, and Zelda will happily insult you and pose for a photo with you. So if you're a Terrahawks fan, do come along.
Love it.
It's not often that intergalactic royalty graces London town.
No, not often at all, you're right.
There'll also be some special new Terrahawks merchandise going on sale on the 10th of October.
Will there?
Yes!
Like what?
Oh, I don't know yet.
Oh, I see. It's that special.
It's that secret that even I don't know
Great.
about it. But there you go. Also, Eric Chew's wonderful Terrahawks poster will be on sale as the deal of the week, all week in celebration of Terrahawks Day.
Great.
So go and grab that. It will be mega cheap.
Love it.
Anyway, onto the new Firestorm. We're talking about Firestorm all the time.
Oh,
right?
of course.
Can you give me Gerry Anderson's Firestorm in your best X Factor voice?
Gerry Anderson's Firestorm. That wasn't very good. No, that wasn't right.
I quite like that.
No, I think it's got to. I've done a little flap on the R. I think it's got to be Gerry Anderson's Firestorm.
Oh.
Did you hear?
Yeah. You were channeling a bit of Wogan there as well.
Ah, the old Wogan. Eh?
Oh, no.
You can't keep a good man down, you know.
Oh, clearly not. Right, anyway, Firestorm, as you may all know, or you should all know by now, is getting its digital and physical premiere on the 27th of October.
Yes.
And we hope you'll join us at firestormhq.com if you can't make it to MCM Comic Con London. Are you coming? We'd love to know.
Yes.
Email us, podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk, and tell us where you'll be watching the Firestorm minisode premiere from.
Fantastic.
MCM or elsewhere.
Yeah, I know you've heard from a few people overseas who are making the journey to come and see it.
We've got people coming over from Germany, Holland.
Great.
Somebody coming from Spain.
Amazing.
Just to come and see us and see the panel.
Lovely.
So that's very exciting. Hope to see you there. And make sure you're following Firestorm social media channels for all the latest updates. Firestorm HQ on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. SF9 Firestorm on Twitter. And firestormhq.com is the website where you'll be able to see everything on the day.
Great. Can I say it now, Jamie? Can I say it?
Is it the thing you normally say?
Yeah, but about this time.
Go on, Richard.
There is new Gerry Anderson stuff being made right now. Accompanied by Cat Flap.
Cat just came in, yeah. Anyway, thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
But that is the end of the news. for this
Great,
week.
great. Now, you mentioned Joe 90 there. Now, over this week, I saw an article by Mark Braxton, who posted on Twitter a link to his article in the Radio Times.
He did.
He'd written an article in the radiotimes.com about Joe 90's 50th anniversary, in which he says, mention Joe 90 to TV viewers of a certain age and they'll probably remember special specs a flying car, a revolving cage, and a catchy theme tune. But to its many fans, the Super Mario Nation series was so much more than that. The Junior Bond format paved the way for series like MI High and films including Spy Kids and Stormbreaker. Now, what do we know about two of those things, Jamie?
Oh, I think there might be a podcast connection there.
I think you'll find I was in two of those.
Well, that's what I meant, Richard. You're in the podcast and you're in the...
Yeah, I did an episode of MI High and I was in Stormbreaker.
Amazing.
I know, I buried Ewan McGregor.
Yes.
I did. You can thank me for that. Jerry's son, Jamie Anderson, has other comparisons to make. When you look at shows like Ben 10 and Joss Whedon's Dollhouse, you can't deny that it's possible that the show's creators have taken some level of inspiration from Joe 90. I also can't help but imagine that there must be a few neuroscientists out there who one day hoped they might be able to implant memories. Anyway, I just thought I'd point you in that direction. It's an interesting article. It contains input from many people who know their stuff.
Absolutely.
Not least your good self, Jamie. And,
well, probably the least knowledgeable of the people mentioned in that article. But yeah, it's a really good one. Mark did a lovely article. Thanks for...
what is going on? Just make yourself at home.
Thanks, Mark, for asking me to contribute.
Yeah, and you can find that article at radiotimes.com or follow Mark on Twitter at BraxM. Now,
BRAXM.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Thank you.
A strange thing happened to me this week.
Go on, Richard. What
Strange
happened
thing that gave me faith in the future
what?
of humanity.
Right. Go on.
Something that proved to me, beyond any doubt, that there are Gerry Anderson fans everywhere. So I was in Wolverhampton last week at the Grand Theatre, where I'm touring with Dave Williams' Awful Auntie.
As Awful Auntie.
As Awful Auntie. And sometimes we give a Q&A after the show for the kids or for the grown-ups in the audience as well. And they ask the usual questions like, how do you learn all the lines, and how does the set move, and who makes your costumes, all that sort of thing. And after we'd done our Q&A, I got a lovely message via Twitter from the guy who'd sort of organised it and who had chaired the question and answer session. His name is James, and he said, I just want to say thank you very much, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's fine. It was an absolute pleasure to do it, because they treated us very nicely at the theatre last week. And then he said, that's great, thank you. I was going to ask you if you know if Space Precinct is available online. You see? They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that I was wearing my Space Precinct t-shirt might have been a bit of a giveaway.
I saw the photo on Twitter.
Yeah. But I think James is a bit of a fan.
Quite right too.
Nice, isn't it? So, of course, I did put him right and say, well, it is available online, but also there's a box set coming out in November that you might just be interested in.
That's very soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, that's right. So I think it's on his Christmas list.
Gosh, in fact, I'll tell you what, today I will be reviewing the behind-the-scenes photo gallery.
Oh, yeah?
Today to finally approve that before it goes off.
Nice.
So that's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, very exciting.
Anyway.
So there you go. Is that the news?
Well, we've
moved on
past
from that,
the news,
have we?
and now we're in the interstitial bit between the news and the other bit that comes next, which is
viewer emails,
listener emails.
But I'm confused because we didn't have the end of news kind of dum. Did we?
We put that in afterwards.
Put it in now. There it is. Great. Now I'm happy.
But now we've had it twice.
Well, that's fine. More the merrier. It's good.
Anyway, look, should we do listener emails?
We have had a few, haven't we?
Well, a couple.
Yeah. So, you can get in touch with us at podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Do send us your emails and also your audio files. We'd love to hear them as well. But Jamie, you've got a lovely big bag of posts there, I can see.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm just going to open it up.
What is going on? It's like you're going to gaffer me to the floor or something.
No, the top's stuck together, that's all. And it's a plastic bag
That's
this time.
highly unconvincing. Okay, let me just reach in there and get an email out. I don't know why an email should rustle like that, but apparently it does.
It's digital, isn't it? Anyway, look, I can do another one if you want.
Yeah, okay.
Here's my post bag.
Right. Okay. That's a little bit better. What if I were to do this? That's pleasing, isn't it?
Oh, bubble wrap post bag. Anyway, look, we're going off on a tangent.
We really are. Sorry about
Too
that.
tangential. So who's the first
Well,
email
now,
from?
Mark Wilson got in touch saying, really looking forward to this upcoming episode of your podcast, with it being the one after Thunderbirds Day, which we haven't spoken about yet, really, have we? We had a great time watching the marathon on Twitch and tweeted you a couple of pictures of me and my eldest boy, Seth, watching at the start of it. He was mesmerised by the takeoff sequences. We broke out the Thunderbirds aircrafts and toys he's got and we started to do our own rescues. Took me back to when I was about his age, planning my own rescues, playing with Tracy Island. And now I'm getting to do it all over again with my little boy. Just wanted to share my Thunderbirds Day experience with you guys. Looking forward to yet another highly entertaining podcast today. Oh.
Sorry.
Oh dear.
Anyway, this is yet another email where somebody's handing it down to the next generation.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Contemporary kids loving a 53-year-old show.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
we see it all the time.
I know.
And it's so frustrating when the wider world doesn't necessarily appreciate it, but they will come to appreciate it.
Well, of course they will. Of course they will. Yeah, absolutely they will. And it is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's when you have children of your own and you find yourself sharing your old childhood interests with them, and they appreciate it and love it as much as you do. That's a very pleasing thing, I have to say.
It is.
It's very nice. So thank you for that, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Now, once again,
Yes.
had some rather long emails.
We have rather, haven't we? Yeah.
And Elliot Webb, I'm afraid I haven't had a chance to cut down yours. I tried to cut it down, but it's literally like 20 paragraphs.
Yeah.
So we'll get there eventually, Elliot. In the meantime, I've got an email from Keith Bowman here.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, I can only deliver a truncated version of your email for length, and it's still quite long.
Right.
But
I'll nip out and make a cup of tea, shall I?
I mean, I could do with a coffee top up if you don't mind. Probably best. Oh, yeah, coffee.
It is International Coffee Day today, by the way.
Is it?
Well, not by the time this goes out, but actually today, as you and I
it is.
sit here, International Coffee Day.
There's no coffee anecdote in this email.
No.
Right. Keith says...
Yes.
Oh, hello.
Oh, quelle surprise.
Unusual greeting, Keith.
Yeah, come in.
I wanted to send you an email to say how grateful I am for your podcast.
Right.
Well, it's a
nice.
pleasure.
Yes,
Hope we don't disappoint today.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. First of all, I've been searching for a new podcast to listen to, and I've often been disappointed in the lack of the subject matter that interests me or the lack of quality of production values.
Oh, I think I know where this might be going.
I'm happy to say that your podcast does not disappoint.
Phew.
On one of those.
Right.
No, I said that. Being a 49-year-old geek who grew up watching and loving Captain Scarlet, more on this in a bit, or possibly not, depending on where I've truncated it.
Okay.
And has since discovered and additionally come to love the other Gerry Anderson shows. I was super excited to discover your podcast. I was immediately pleased with the high production value. Oh, Keith, that is very generous of you.
Bless you, Keith.
And the sheer amount of great content.
Right, well, that's fair enough.
Oh, brackets, full disclosure, I'm on the third podcast.
Oh, I see.
Okay. You'll probably be disappointed by the time you get to this one.
Yeah.
In an effort to keep this email to an actual readable length,
Yes.
I would just like to make a few points.
Yeah, go on then.
If you would be so kind as to indulge me. I'm going to indulge you on one point, I think, Keith.
Oh, yes, fair enough.
First of all, I want to say how great it is that you're honouring and extending your father's legacy and his work.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
He was truly an amazing man and a visionary. I completely agree. The sheer amount of imagination and ingenuity that was put into his craft are the foundational reasons why his creative output is still revered today. Quite right too.
Yeah.
I am sure he loved you very much and was immensely proud of you, and I'm sure he's looking down on you extremely pleased with how you're honouring his memory and work. Isn't that sweet?
That's wonderful.
And I can only hope my son will respect my work the same way when he's old enough.
Well,
Isn't that
we'll
nice?
hope that, yeah.
I mean, children tend to let you down, so. But I really appreciate that, Keith. That's lovely. Speaking of my son, that brings me to my second point. I'm indulging the second, but not the third. I've recently introduced my 8-year-old son to the world of Gerry Anderson. Yet another case of handing down.
Yeah.
I started with the Captain Scarlet DVD set I own, and now that most of the Anderson shows are available on Amazon, we've been working our way through Joe 90, Stingray, Fireball XL5, Supercar, and it says here the Thunderbirds.
The Thunderbirds.
I think we'll say Thunderbirds, Keith,
Yeah.
for fear of people lynching
Obviously,
you.
it's just a typo, I think.
Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah.
You should be proud that your father created so many shows that can still excite and enthrall kids today and spark their imaginations, just as they did when I was young. Well,
now you see that's an interesting
couldn't
point,
agree
isn't
more.
it? Yeah, because many people think Thunderbirds and so on. It's the '60s and it's of its time, but actually these programs are timeless, aren't they? That's what we're discovering more and more. You know.
Now, we mentioned Thunderbirds Day. There was the Twitch marathon, which
Yeah.
unfortunately
Yes.
there were some issues with the stream, which
Yes.
we can possibly cover in a second. But I saw repeatedly comments there from people saying, I would never believe that this was 53 years old. In fact, somebody tweeted something along the lines of, "Isn't it amazing how a 53-year-old show looks so beautiful and so fresh, but 5-year-old CGI looks like milk that's gone off."
There you go.
Or something
Isn't
like that.
interesting?
Yeah,
Yes, that's right.
just incredible.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Well, what a lovely letter that was. Thank you.
Yes.
Email from Keith there.
Thanks,
Very nice.
Keith. Maybe we'll do part 2 with your third point and more
to be
next
continued.
time.
Yeah, that's right.
Just on the Thunderbirds on Twitch thing, We're very sorry if you had a disrupted viewing experience on there.
Yes.
It was nothing to do with us, Gov. It wasn't us. Unfortunately, it looks like there were some issues on the Shout Factory's side, and then they all went to bed. Timing didn't work, and so there was a long period when the stream was offline.
That's disappointing.
Which is really, really sad. I hope none of you missed anything that you really wanted to see.
Yes.
Maybe there'll be a repeat of it in the future.
Yes.
And it's certainly something which we will take up with Shout and ITV to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because it's really, really disappointing, especially when there's so many fans all around the world, and basically anybody outside of North America was unable to watch for half a day on Monday.
Wow, really?
Real shame. But anyway, we hope you enjoyed it, and at this stage when we're recording, we're not sure if or when the stream was restored, but hopefully you caught some episodes towards the end of the day.
That's right.
But it was great. It was a great event, and on the Sunday, so many people watching. I think nearly 4,000 people watching live all at the same time.
Gosh.
And everybody just so excited about it.
Yeah.
It was really, really lovely. So thanks everybody who joined in on Thunderbirds Day.
Yeah, very nice.
There we go. Anyway, if you've got a question you want to send us, chuck it over to
podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk.
Very good. We'll do our best to answer it and read it out, but do keep it as short as possible.
Well, yes.
Yeah, no more than 3 paras if possible, please. Thank you very much.
That's right. Another way to get in touch is via Twitter. We've had a few tweets in the last few days. Steve Cann tweeted us, said how much he thoroughly enjoyed Pod 15 just now, featuring Jamie's fascinating chat with the legendary Shane Rimmer, of course. Also, Mark Simpson Wedge. You can find him on Twitter @DalekSram. That's Dalek and then SRAM. He's posted a new video. They're often worth a look. He posted a video about why he thought it was important to celebrate Thunderbirds, what with Thunderbirds Day approaching and all, as it was last week.
Marvellous.
So do have a look at that, and we'd always love to see your creative ideas, your videos and models and all sorts of stuff, pictures. Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Shall we move on?
Oh, okay then. Something I said?
Not at all. No, I just thought we should get to the interview.
I think we should.
I'm quite excited about it.
Yeah. Go on then. Explain again who it's with.
So the interview this week is with Phil Plait. He is an astronomer, science writer, popular science blogger, and skeptic.
Ah, right. Okay.
It's his official job title.
Oh, I like that.
He writes for Sci-Fi. He is a huge Space 1999 fan. I found him because he wrote an article about his top 5 fictional scientists, and Professor Bergman, played by Barry Morse, was his number 1.
Really?
Yeah, and we talk about that and why in the interview. But a really great chat with Phil. We cover everything from fiction to science.
Nice.
So right across the spectrum, and we touch on some things like why science fiction is so important in inspiring scientists, all that kind of stuff. And it was just a really lovely chat. I hope we'll have him back in the future, but for now, I'll hand over to Phil Plait.
Well, hello, Super Marionation fans. Did I pronounce that right? Super Mar? Is there an extra syllable in it? I missed one?
Got it right first time. It's not like aluminum. There's no Americanism.
Oh, here we go. Oh,
no,
my God. No. I'm going to have to put a bunch of extra U's in all of my words here when I talk to you.
Yeah, please do.
My name is Phil Plait. I am an astronomer and a science fiction fan. A bit of a nerd, I suppose you might say. And in fact, a lot of my life has been guided or inspired by science and science fiction. I think the two are very, very intertwined. I mean, half of the term science fiction is science. And I grew up watching UFO in Space 1999, so I am pretty excited to be talking about it today.
Amazing, Phil. And thank you very much for joining us, because I know you're a very busy man, aren't you?
It comes and goes.
All right, busy when you're busy.
Yeah, it's in waves, right? There are times when I'm like, if I had any hair to pull out, I'd be doing it. And other times it's like, well, I think I'll just go out and walk around the yard for a minute.
Exactly the same here. If you're kind of saying science and science fiction are already intertwined. If you take me back to your earliest exposure to science and astronomy and what got you interested, I'm guessing that came before television shows.
It was probably in the womb. I don't know. When I look back, as far back as I can remember, I always loved science and science fiction. And really my earliest memories. And so I don't know, how it all started or anything like that. I did, when I was, I guess I was almost 5. I remember watching the Apollo 11 moon landing on TV. So that's how old I am. But then again, anybody who's a big fan of UFO and Space 1999 probably going to be roughly my age at a minimum, unless they came on it later, I suppose. But that's, I remember doing that. And then a couple of years later, or I'd have to look up the date, I guess it was the next year, my family, we rented an RV back then. They weren't called that. It was a Winnebago, gigantic, tin can, and drove down to Florida and watched Apollo 15 launch. So I was there for that. I watched that live. And it wasn't too much later than that, right around that same time, my folks bought a really junky department store telescope. And we looked at Saturn through it. And I remember just being blown away by that. And I was like, we're talking 5 or 6.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I was always into science. And I remember watching, Japanese monster movies and every black and white, every terrible monster movie, horror movie, Hammer horror, all of that stuff. And so for me, these two things have been together my entire life. And, now, hey, look, I'm a professional astronomer and a science communicator. I write about this stuff. And, I'm writing for sci-fi.com right now. So for me, this is all one big package.
Yeah. Wow. A great place to end up then, having been inspired by seeing Saturn as a kid.
Yeah,
So,
I'm doing okay with this. I'm pretty happy, to be honest. Yeah.
Pretty happy. So then your first Gerry Anderson viewing experience, when UFO came first chronologically, but I feel like
Right.
you would have been a bit young for that, and it would have been a bit dark, but maybe not. What was your first viewing experience of Anderson?
No, it was UFO. I remember, the only time I can remember watching it specifically, I remember seeing it and all of that. The only specific event I remember actually sitting with my family in the basement watching TV was because there was a tornado warning or something. I lived in Northern Virginia, which is in the sort of the center of the East Coast of the U.S., and we get hurricanes blown in from the East Coast or from the Atlantic. And there was a hurricane or something, and there were tornado warnings from it. And so we were all in the basement to stay safe watching UFO. And the only thing I remember from that event, besides being down there and worried because I was 7, was my sister, Marcy, saying how cool she thought the purple hair was for the women working on the moon base.
Amazing.
And I was too young to appreciate the more adult aspects of UFO. And like you said, it's a dark show. I went back and watched them all. I don't remember, a few years back.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh wow, this is a lot, darker than I thought. And the storytelling is very different than we have now. A lot of the stories just kind of end and things just happen, and it's not like that anymore on TV. So it's pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, there's not so many of the kind of PR happy endings in UFO. A lot more grim stuff happens, and yeah, it certainly wasn't a kid show like the stuff that had come before in Dad's work.
Yeah, I guess so. And the 60s. When did that show come out? Early 70s?
1969, 70, maybe 70, 71 in the US, I guess.
Okay, well, dystopian science fiction was becoming a lot more popular. And so you see that in the movies. You see something like Planet of the Apes, which I remember loving as a kid, because it's like, space travel and time travel and apes. And then I watched it again as a teenager, I guess, and it was like, oh my God, this is so dark and grim. I loved it. I mean, I love that aspect of it now even more. It's such a grim movie, but that's what a lot of that stuff was back then. And so it's kind of neat to sometimes go back and see, something like Star Trek, which was very hopeful compared to something like Planet of the Apes, which is not, and UFO, which I don't know if it was either dystopian or hopeful. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in it and a lot of bad stuff. Nothing ever seems to go right for Ed Straker, and he was kind of a jerk.
Yeah, I think he meant well, but his life kind of gradually fell apart, didn't it?
Yeah, and he's yelling at people and getting in trouble and making the wrong decisions, and it was just kind of neat. And I see that very much in Koenig as well in Space 1999. I remember looking back to him when I was, I guess 12 or 13 when the show was airing in the US and thinking he was like a big hero and everything. And now I look back at him and it's like, holy crap, he made a lot of really terrible decisions. He gets angry for no reason, all kinds of stuff. And so I can see the direct link between him and Straker.
Yeah. Well, the two series were,
supposed to be right?
connected. Yeah. Well, exactly. So I'm not surprised that connection is there. So take me back to 12, 13-year-old you watching Space 1999 for the first time, if you can remember it or generate kind of early impressions of it. Did you see it like trailers for it, or did you just happen to catch an episode? Do you remember it?
Oh, golly. We're talking, what, 76 or so? 77 when it aired in the US?
76, 77, yeah.
So I would
like yesterday, 12. Phil.
Yeah, well, some of the memories I have are pretty clear, and other ones, I don't remember seeing it for the first time any more than I remember seeing UFO or Star Trek or, Kolchak, the Night Stalker. I don't know if that ever aired in.
Oh, no. I may well have done, but not what I'm familiar with.
Oh, really? Okay. It's a direct precursor of the X-Files. I mean,
okay.
The creator of the X-Files talked about Kolchak a lot. It's about a reporter who tracks down supernatural stories and nobody ever believes him. But it was a product of its times. And I remember I just watched those shows all the time. I'd rush home from school or, eat dinner really quickly and then run to watch the one TV that you had back then.
Of course.
For a family instead of 17, littering the closet, some old monitor you don't even use anymore. So to be honest, I don't remember seeing it for the first time, but I do remember, reruns of Breakaway and a few others. And a friend of mine, John Reynolds, in middle school and high school. So that would be like, grade 7, whatever. I can never remember how in England it's like 4th level A masters, something. There's some code that you all use for those ages. I don't know what it is. But we used to, that was appointment television. I'd run to his house, he'd run to mine, and we'd spend the night and watch that. And, the whole thing, we just loved it. Bought the Eagle models. I still have them. I have the reissued gigantic one. I haven't built it yet. I'm terrified to build it. But yeah, we worship Space 1999. It was like our whole lives at that point. We loved it.
Awesome. But why? I mean, you wouldn't say necessarily that show was designed for teenage boys, would you? I mean,
sure. I think so.
UFO maybe with the scantily clad moon base girls.
Well, if you're trying to appeal to an adolescent heterosexual young man in the 1970s, either one of those shows would do fine. I mean, 1999 had did have these sexy scenes sometimes for the men and the women.
Mm-hmm.
The crush I had on Catherine Schell is not to be minimized.
Really?
Oh yeah, did I love her? My friend and I, we collected magazine articles and all that. I still have, I do still have somewhere in this room or in this house, it's probably in a box someplace, clippings of magazine articles from back then.
Fantastic.
And I bought, we used to go to science fiction conventions and you'd see some of the folks there. And I have a Starlog, issue 1, Starlog magazine, big science fiction magazine with Star Trek. Issue 2 was Space 1999. And over the years, I've collected a few signatures. And we can talk about this. Clearly, I don't have any problems opening up.
Clearly not. I hope Catherine Schell hears this at some point.
Me too. I met her at a convention 18 years ago now and told her about the huge crush I had on her. And she was a little taken aback by that at first because I was just a bonehead and just was like, blah, 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 so excited to meet her. But then after being at the convention for a while and actually hanging out with her for a little while, I found her to be very charming and she was more like just talking. And we actually wound up she saw, I was walking past her at a bar or something, or she was just sitting having, I don't know, you remember, just a glass of water or whatever. And she called me over and wanted to ask me a couple of questions about science and stuff. So that was
nice.
yeah, everything I could have ever hoped for.
Amazing.
Yeah, I told my wife, it's like, yeah, sorry. This is all I'm going to be thinking about for the next week. Yeah.
I'm sure she was very supportive though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We both have our celebrity crushes, and I'm always encouraging her, come with me to this convention. This guy will be here. Mm-hmm. It's actually out of just guilt to assuage my own conscience of
whatever makes you feel better.
I had crushes on over my life that I actually get a chance to meet.
Well, I'm glad she came around to it and wasn't scared off by your bonehead approach.
Oh, she was everything I could have hoped for in a teen crush you eventually get to meet as an adult. She was the only word that, I mean, I assume you've met her.
Yes.
She's elegant. She's just very, very poised and thoughtful and considerate and just very elegant. And it's a little bit overwhelming for such a big, lumbering mammoth like me. I mean, not like I'm big. I'm just like a klutz and just all over the place. And so it was really, oh, there you go. He's showing me a picture of them together right now on the screen. Yeah.
That's relatively recent. Yeah, but I'll post that in the show notes of this episode.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And I have pictures someplace from the convention back in 2000, but they were, it was taken on film. And so it's just, not that great, but it's around. I should find them.
You must. Yeah. Send them over if you find them.
I just scan them all in. Yeah.
I'm going to get into the series 1 versus 2 in a bit, obviously with your Catherine Schell crush.
Well, she was in both.
Yeah, but there's some resonance for series 2. There must be because of that. But more broadly than the celebrity crush element, what appealed to you then as a boy watching it, and still now?
That question you asked me 20 minutes ago before I started blathering on about Ms. Schell.
It's important that we cover Catherine as well, but
even now, and I am of a certain age, if something has spaceships in it, I will tend to watch it. I just love outer space and aliens and spaceships and all that stuff. And so that was sort of the immediate appeal of the show. The Eagle is still one of the best spaceships ever designed. I mean, it's not really elegant, but it is so cool looking and functional. And you look at it and go, oh yeah, sure. That looks like a spaceship. It looks like the Enterprise is neat, but it looks so different than anything you expect from a utilitarian standpoint. But the Eagle, you look at it and go, yeah, sure. I see, how this works and why you would build it that way. And so all of that and, giant explosions and monsters, and it was just everything you could ask for a weekly series for somebody who was 13 and digging science and science fiction.
Yeah. Geek's Paradise.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And how did it compare at the time to things that you were watching around it, like Star Trek or other shows? Did it feel kind of on a level with them? Because I was watching a Star Trek episode the other day, Balance of Terror. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the Romulan commander, yeah.
Brilliant story, but then I look at things like the effects and the masonry and the dust falling down in the Romulan ship when they're under attack and compare that to what they were trying to do with Space 1999. Slightly different era, I know, but...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that whole Romulan command deck was like filmed in somebody's closet, which I like. It's so small and cramped. I kind of like that whole thing. Yeah, well, Space 1999 came out about 10 years later, and so the aesthetic was different, and the special effects were a lot better in most cases. But it was a different show, and so I was watching Star Trek in reruns. I wasn't a huge Star Trek fan. Not that I didn't like it; it just wasn't really on my radar as a thing to become a fan of. Not until later. But I was watching, this and Outer Limits and Twilight Zone. I was a pretty voracious consumer of science fiction on TV and reading. And I don't know how I'd compare Space 1999 to other shows. That's a really good question. It's so different. It was cerebral in its way in the first season, became more comic book like in the second season. I guess I don't think that's unfair to say.
I think that's totally fair. In fact, that's probably the fairest analysis you'll get from anyone who watched both seasons.
Yeah, and I liked both seasons when I was younger, and there's a lot to be said positive for the second season, although as an adult going back and trying to rationalize how much I liked the show, there were a lot of themes that were dropped from the first season that a lot of people would go, good. Whereas I was like, no, I think maybe, some of these ideas, people would say, oh, it's ridiculous. This moon was blown out of the Earth's orbit and it's traveling from star to star. And I've written about this saying there was this overarching idea that there was a higher power behind this. They go into the black hole, the black sun, as they called it back then.
Yeah.
And they talked to something there, an intelligence there, and the whole thing with Ara, and they touch the planet, and the planet disappears, and they knew this was coming. It was foretold, and all this, and it's like, this isn't science fiction. This is more fantasy, or what have you, whatever sort of genre you want to call it.
Yeah.
But this, I like this idea. I kind of like the idea of whether you want to call it God or maybe an intelligence to the universe itself or whatever as a science fiction topic. I dig that. I really like it. And I would have liked to have seen more of that in later seasons. Just, it's like, what are the plans that these creatures, this God or whatever, had for the moon base or for the universe itself? And there were shows that Stargate Universe, one of the last of the Stargate series, in their second series touched on that. There was stuff going on in the background radiation of the universe. This is something that was created when the universe itself formed, basically, and they were finding a signal in it, some sort of intelligence embedded in it. And it's like, holy crap! I love huge themes like that. So that would have been nice. And so what I'm saying is, as an adult, when I went back and watched the show, I guess when it came out on Blu-ray a few years ago, and I watched all the episodes again, it's like, oh, these themes connecting everything together. This is actually really cool.
Yeah.
It wasn't handled maybe as well as it could have been because it was the 1970s and the writing style was different, but it was neat.
Yeah, it was kind of ahead of its time, really, having that bigger overarching thing going on. That's a much more contemporary entertainment thing, I would say now.
Yeah, you're right. Art science fiction came in with Babylon 5, I suppose, and and it wasn't until, and then it became, with Next Generation, Star Trek, and those shows. It was episodic, and there were themes that went across a series or whatever, and they would bring back things. But a sort of a one, each episode continuing a single story. That's a relatively recent thing.
Yeah.
And you can see hints of that in Space 1999. It's kind of a shame that, this huge show, this huge idea, came out in the 1970s instead of the 2000s, when I think the ideas could be handled a lot better. And by that, I mean, the writers are more used to this sort of thing, and the audience also as well. The audience be ready for it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It'd be fascinating to see what could have happened or might happen if there was ever to be a reboot of said show.
Oh man, I mean, look at shows on Netflix, and people sit and watch them all. Stranger Things and Travelers and all of these other shows that are quite good. And you cannot come in the middle. You can't just watch episode 3. It's not going to make any sense. You have to start at the beginning and watch it through the end. And I love that. I like these big, meaty stories. It's so much fun. And it's a lot more fun to think about them and talk about them and read about them too.
Yeah. Wow. I feel I can really tell how much you love the show, which is so nice.
There are shows I can take and leave. And, if Space 1999 were to come out today, with the same stories and everything that it did when it first came out, I would probably go, not for me. It's a show of its time, and that's.
Absolutely.
But it had a big impact on me. Victor Bergman, the scientist, had a big impact on me. My favorite thing about him is that sometimes he would see something, go, "Yeah, I don't know what this is. What are we looking at here?" Beats me, and then he'd go away and think about it.
Yeah.
And he was very philosophical, very human, as opposed to Spock, who was human in other ways. Not
But
as
he was a bit of a know-it-all, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, and they would sometimes come back to Victor would say, "Well, I'll figure something out," and then come back and suddenly he's invented this entire force field that can protect this moon. I'm like, wait, what? Where did they get this thing from? So there were some plot devices, but in general, I really liked how Victor was very concerned about things and very human and more of a pondering type than Spock, Spock was more of a geek. He's just like, he would just say things. Oh, this is what's happening. All right. So I think that this show, like I said, the show had a big impact on me. It was sort of the first big science fiction show that I really loved. And, you don't forget your first love, even flawed as it might be, or as flawed as I was when I was 12. I was such an ass when I was a kid. There are some things I like to look back on and see it for all of its gold and all of its warts.
Okay, that is a very fair thing to say, and I don't think many people who are real fans of the shows would say if it came out today and I watched it for the first time, I don't think I would like it. Actually,
well, it's hard to say. I still love the Eagles. I still like this. Some of the special effects are great.
Yeah.
Like I said, a lot of the storylines are good, but the polyester I might go, huh.
The flares
could use less flared bell bottom polyester brown striped. Okay.
Fair enough.
But like I said, that aesthetic was of the time, and there you go.
Yeah. You mentioned Victor Bergman. I mean, whenever I watch it, I always feel like he is kind of this strangely warm and avuncular character. Mm-hmm. Gives you a certain degree of comfort, and I always think of that the scene in Black Sun where it's all coming to an end in inverted commas, and they open the brandy.
That is such a good scene,
isn't it? Beautiful.
60-year-old brandy. I've been saving it for 10 years. Just waiting for a proper occasion to celebrate. Well, not everybody might think this was a celebration, but it is to me. And if ever there was an occasion, this is it.
To everything that might have been.
To everything that was.
One of my favorites.
I actually, I believe I quote that scene. I've got a newsletter that I write every couple of times a week. And we're recording this on September 11th. I don't know if I should say that. It's, a little behind the scenes peek here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Lift the curtain from the magic. So, of course, 2 days from now is Breakaway Day, September 13th. It's a Thursday, and my newsletter comes out on a Thursday. So I have a section on it, basically building the fourth wall. I just say, we all remember that fateful day, 19 years ago now, when the moon blasted away. And I quote Victor Bergman there to, and now I'm blanking on the quote, to all that was or might have been.
It's to everything that might have been, or to everything that was. Yeah. It's Tony that says to everything that might have been, wasn't it? And then Bergman says to everything that was.
And you're right. I mean, of all the scenes in that show, now how do I even wrap a ribbon around this? when I watch science fiction shows, I love all the action. I love all the plot development and all that. But it is so charming, so warm, so inviting to have a scene where it's just some of the characters sitting around living their lives.
Yeah.
And you don't see that very often. And it's like, this is so important for character development. I care about these characters because this, and this. But then, you see, was it Paul playing guitar in one scene, just kind of sitting around in his room? I think they were awaiting some doom. It might even have been Black Sun.
Yeah.
But, with Victor and with Bergman and Koenig sitting there splitting a brandy and just, chatting with each other, because there's not a lot they need to say to each other. It's exactly the kind of thing that brings a show into the sort of 3 dimensions. You're not just watching a 2-dimensional thing anymore. There's depth to it, and so that for me was kind of a shining moment.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I think that when I saw that when I was a kid, I'm sure we had some VHS copies of Space 1999 at home. That was the moment when I think I forged a connection, the same kind of connection as a kid that I had with the Doctor, watching classic Doctor Who.
Right.
Something trustworthy and warm about him, which kind of made me want to, want to find out more, want to kind of follow him to some degree. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh no, exactly. Koenig, a lot of the times, was a very 2-dimensional character. He was just, the strict commander, whatever, barking orders or, shouting at people because they weren't getting the answers he wanted or whatever. But then to back off and to have him, talk about an old friend or something that happened in the past, or in the second season, he was embarrassed by, it was Bringers of Wonder. And the woman shows up that apparently he had a past with, and Helena was very upset about this, called her Barracuda. I remember that. I'd not heard that term when I was a kid that way, and I had to look it up. I'd only heard it in the song by Heart, Barracuda, great song. But it was just that struck me as being funny. When you see these characters actually being human, that's always wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any particular episodes other than Bringers of Wonder or Black Sun that particularly stand out in your mind? There's one season 1 episode everybody always says is there.
Yes.
One of Nightmares. Are you going to say the same one, Phil?
Yes. Dragon's Domain.
Of course. What about it? Why is it so impactful?
I don't know. I think if I had to guess, it's simply because the monster was so terrifying. You hadn't seen anything like that before. An honestly terrifying monster. Outer Limits had a few for American audiences that they actually had to blank out or do things because people were so terrified. Nobody'd seen anything like this before. And Star Trek had 1 or 2, the Salt Vampire, things like that. But the dragon in that was big, and the noise was scary, and the tentacles flying everywhere, and one glowing eye, and it spat out burned out husks of corpses. That was really, yikes. And whenever I talk about Space 1999, and I mean whenever I mention it online or whatever, somebody will always ask and say, I don't remember much about that show, but there was this one episode. So I think that really blew a lot of people away. I think that was it.
It really did. It's always the one, and it's always the monster. Even though you watch it now, and the monster, compared to stuff now, is not super convincing. I don't know. Through contemporary eyes, maybe it's not so striking. But I guess in the context of the 1970s, it must have been terrifying.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to disentangle how I felt about it then with now. I mean, there was a monster on Outer Limits that scared me so badly when I was a little kid that I used to hide behind the sofa when that episode came on. I had nightmares about it. And I watched it again some years ago, and I was like, oh my God, it's just a guy with like fried eggs on his face for eyes. Just it's ridiculous. But there was still that little frisson of fear in the back of my neck, those cold fingers when I saw it. I was like, oh God, there's something atavistic, something that taps into your lizard part of your brain.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it for Dragon's Domain. And when I rewatched it, I had to laugh. There's such a plot hole in it that they just brush aside, where it's like this happened. It's a series of flashbacks. This old friend of Koenig's was on a mission to the outer solar system, or someplace. It's not clear. Space. Yeah, the way the galaxy was designed in Space 1999 kind of makes my astronomer brain go, oh, they're just going out to some place. It's not really clear where they're going. And it should take 1,000 years to get there, but okay, I'm fine. So he goes out there and finds this graveyard of spaceships. There's a monster on one of them, and he comes back, and it takes him like a year, and nobody believes his story. Now he's on Moonbase. They've been traveling for months or years or whatever at this point, and they come across the same spaceship graveyard, and it's like, well, they're hundreds, thousands, millions of light years away. What's going on? And they just blow it off in the show by saying, well, we got blown out of Earth orbit. Maybe this thing did too. And I'm like, really? That's how you're explaining this?
That'll do.
And, and the main character, I'm blanking on his name now, was having nightmares before they got to the spaceship graveyard. So, why was he psychically connected to this? What was that about? Although now that I think about it, the monster hypnotized them all. It sent out some sort of, rays, and it. So maybe
is that the technical term?
Yeah, I believe that is the scientific term. Rays, and so maybe that was maybe I can back off of that complaint. Yeah. But the rest of it is like, well, all right, whatever. We're just going to skip over this little plot device and get back to the story.
And just scare the bejesus out of kids watching instead.
Exactly.
Okay, so we'll put you in the Dragon's Domain Club with everybody else, whoever watched it in 1999.
But what other episodes, right? Gosh, there were some I really liked, and some I didn't even at the time. I liked the ones that featured Alan Carter a lot and the Eagles. Anything that had, the Eagles flying around. I really did like the one where they blow up the asteroid and then behind it is a planet that they didn't see, which again doesn't make any sense astronomically. But that wasn't a hard science fiction episode. That was more of a mystical, philosophical one. Yeah. But that one had a big impact on me as well, especially when the moon and the planet are going to touch, and it's going to do something to this planet to raise it to the next level of whatever consciousness in the universe, whatever. The scene when the planet's getting close and everybody's thinking they're about to die, that had a big impact on me when I was like 13. Really dug that one.
Wow. So it had a pretty significant impact on your formative years, I
guess. And come to think of it, the one where Helena's old boyfriend, her husband, her ex-husband, comes back. He's been living on this planet, and he's made of antimatter or something like that. And
I should say that your science face slightly screws up when you have to deliver these improbable plots.
Yeah, they played fast and loose to some of the real science there. But yeah, they're going to colonize this planet, and he's like, no, go away. You're not going to like it here. And then everything blows up. And I remember like the moon blowing up. And as a kid, that doesn't happen in a TV show. They don't kill all the characters off. And so when I thought, what are they going to do here? I was really kind of dumbstruck by that. It was amazing.
Yeah. Funnily enough, that was one of Dad's things that he always wanted to do that he was never able to, which was to do a new series, set up 4 or 5 or 6 main characters, and halfway through kill the main one, kill the number one guy. And then you're left thinking, well, that could happen to anybody. He's not coming back. It's not a trick. So I'm sure there were elements where he was always trying to shove that kind of thing in there. Maybe that's one of those.
I'm all for that. That's a really good way of saying, a lot of Joss Whedon shows do that, where he just kills off main characters, and it's the way of saying, here you go. You really don't. There's no reset button.
You're not safe, audience.
Yeah. And I quite like that. That shows you what the stakes are. The Expanse did that. The sci-fi channel show that's going to be moving to Amazon. In the very first episode, it's a huge misdirection. You think that this one set of characters are sort of the main characters, and then right at the end of the episode, they blow them all up, and it's like, oh crap, now what? And so I was totally fooled by that, even though I had read the books. Oh my God, I read the books. Totally forgotten. It had been a couple of years, so I'd totally forgotten how that happened. And yeah, I'd like to. I mean, Victor Bergman just disappears.
Yeah,
what happened to Victor?
I think series 2 was poorer for it.
Yes. Of course, his character wouldn't have fit into those stories that way. But still, as I remember in the fandom, somebody saying, if we'd even had a scene where, they had discussed it, Helena and John had been sitting there going, if only we had checked that helmet a little bit better before he went out on that, that mission on the other side or whatever. So that was unfortunate.
Yeah. Very poor Victor.
I want to mention one episode because this one has a good moral for scientists in it. There was one called The Last Sunset where these alien probes land on the moon and they start giving the moon an atmosphere. And when I was a kid, I remember thinking, well, that's ridiculous. The moon doesn't have enough gravity to hold on to air that long. And I remember the scene where they open the windows in Main Mission, and I thought, why do they have latches on the windows on a moon base? That maybe they installed them afterwards. I don't know. But as a kid, I remember thinking there's no way, those probes could hold enough air to give it an atmosphere. And also there's not enough gravity on the moon to hold an atmosphere. And it turns out I'm wrong in both cases.
Oh, really?
The second one first is that, sure, the moon has plenty of gravity. 1/6 of the Earth's gravity is more than enough to hold on to an atmosphere. It would hold on to it. You'd have to replenish it. But you could just, if you gave the moon enough air to have something like the pressure on Earth, that would last for a century or two before you'd have to start, pumping more air in because you just lose some due to the low gravity. So that's actually, and there are problems with it. The way the atmosphere would be structured would be different and all that kind of stuff. But, putting that aside, that quote unquote mistake, I thought, was not really a mistake. And the other one is that, well, first of all, they're alien probes. Who knows how they work? Maybe they had, they had wormhole connections to a planet and they were sucking that planet's atmosphere dry. But honestly, what they could have been doing is those probes could have landed on the moon and were breaking down the rocks inside the moon to remove the oxygen bound up in the rocks. That turns out probably wouldn't work, but the way it was depicted on the show. But it's not something that is scientifically impossible. So I kind of like retrofitting, retconning, as they say, retroactive configuration, some of this stuff. And so there I was, as a science nerd, thinking I knew everything, and it turns out I was wrong with my 2 biggest complaints about that episode.
So Phil,
let me ask you. How old were you when these shows came out? Did you watch them getting made?
I am afraid to report that I was not born on Space 1999. So I was born in 1985.
Okay, I apologize. You're this big on my screen.
Yeah, whatever.
He's an inch tall on my screen. I have no idea. You could be 18 or you could be 50. I cannot tell.
Generic bald guy in front of you, right? So
exactly.
No,
unlike me. Yes.
Exactly. We're both generic bald guys.
We were talking about this before the interview started. It's like looking in a mirror as we're video chatting. We look a lot alike.
We do. So I grew up with Terrahawks. If that means anything to you at all, probably not.
No. What is that?
That's a 1980s puppet show, which is kind of a dark comedy kind of thing, kind of vibe to it. I will send you some Blu-rays in due course, and you can try out Terrahawks.
Terrahawks?
Yeah, Terrahawks.
Oh, there's a town in the U.S. called Terre Haute, and that's what I thought you said. And I thought, why would he set a science fiction show with puppets in Indiana? All right, okay, all right, good. We're on the same page now.
It's an interesting one. Then I was surrounded by VHS tapes of Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and UFO. I think we had a VHS of Invasion UFO the kind of TV movie compilation version.
Yes.
And also Destination Moonbase Alpha, I think.
And Queen of Space.
Oh, we didn't have Queen of Space, sadly.
Okay.
I'm guessing by your face that you did.
I just remember seeing it like advertised in TV Guide, because that's how you used to find out about TV shows, kids. Back in the day, you'd get this little tiny magazine book in the mail on Thursday that had all the shows coming up for the next week. And it said, Queen of Space, something. And I thought, well, this sounds just like Space 1999. And then I watched it. And it's like, oh, it's just 2 edited episodes of the second season. Maya is apparently the Queen of Space, slapped together. So.
But at least it was heavy on the Maya, right? So
yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. In terms of the science, Phil, and obviously from your perspective now as a scientist, really, that's a fair thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Astronomer and science communication, all that sort of stuff. The 2 things that people like to pick on are the feasibility of blowing the moon out of Earth's orbit, or the sun's orbit, more specifically, I guess, or the sun's gravitational.
Yeah, it's harder to get it away from the sun than the Earth.
Yeah, and also the effect and potential catastrophic consequences for the Earth itself. Would you mind just touching on those 2 things for me? I mean, is it feasible, and I know you've written on this before as we were discussing, is it feasible to blow the moon out of Earth's orbit with a nuclear explosion or otherwise?
Sorry, I thought I had turned all my...
Oh, don't worry.
I've muted everything, and I'm still getting
I've done this exactly the same. I mute things, and halfway through it's gone blurp, but it's fine. Well,
And when I was a kid, I just remember thinking all this stuff always going wrong with the computers and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that would never happen." And now, it is the future. And
that was the most accurate part.
I cannot get my phone to ring when somebody called. Like my wife is calling me because she needs to talk to me about something right now, and it won't ring. And yet, at 7 a.m, the alarm goes off when I turn that alarm off. So, anyway. So let's talk about the science. Is it feasible to blow the moon out of the Earth's orbit with a nuclear explosion?
Or otherwise? It's not.
And in the show, there's a little bit of jargon, of babbly jargon, which you get in every science fiction show, where it's, is this they call it a magnetic explosion, but it was all the nuclear waste from the reactors. So, what does this really mean? Well, let's just take it at face value and say it's a nuclear explosion. The amount of energy it takes to move something, it's called the kinetic energy. And there's a very simple equation for it. It depends on how much mass something is and how fast you want to move it. And this is very familiar to everybody who's ever thrown a rock versus tried to push a car. Something that has more mass, it takes a lot more effort to get it moving. And the faster you want it to get moving, the more effort it takes as well. When you have something as massive as the moon, it takes a lot of energy to affect its orbit. And you can calculate how much energy that is. And it turns out it's far more energy than every nuclear weapon ever built on the face of Earth. Every atomic bomb, every hydrogen bomb, everything. It's just the amount of energy it takes to take something that big and push it away from the Earth is actually larger than the amount of energy it would take to vaporize it. In some cases, that's true. And so if you have an explosion big enough to push the Earth to the moon that quickly, and you can calculate this because in Breakaway, they're slammed down onto the ground, and you can time that, and you can say, well, they literally cannot move. So that they're accelerating at a certain rate, probably something like 10 times Earth's gravity. At even 5 or 6 times gravity, you can pick your arms up. It's really hard, but you could. At 10, no, you're pinned to the ground. And it goes on for some amount of time, and so you can calculate how much energy that is. And I've done this before, and it's a ridiculous amount of energy, and it's basically enough to vaporize the moon. It would just the far side of the moon would just be a gigantic smoking hole. So yeah, that doesn't work. And then even then, and this is also sort of typical of science fiction shows. They try to make this huge thing happen, and then it turns out when you do the math, it's not huge enough. 10 gravities of acceleration for the couple of minutes that they do it is not enough to break the moon out of sun's orbit. The moon's orbiting the Earth at a very relatively slow speed, about 1 kilometer per second. So if you get it moving at 2 kilometers per second, it'll leave the Earth orbit. That's just the way the math works, even less. But to get it to leave the sun's orbit, you have to accelerate it by an additional 14 or 15 kilometers per second. And that's a lot. And they did not accelerate enough to do that. So what would actually happen is, as I recall, I haven't done this math in a long time. This is how I remember doing it. And as I recall, it would just go on a highly elliptical orbit around the sun, and that would be it. On the other hand,
yes,
so as we talked about earlier, they made clear there were higher powers at work, and such, and wormholes and things like that. So space warps, as they were called in the show.
Yeah.
So, in the end, yes, this may have been something that triggered something they may have needed. Why didn't the higher power just pluck it out of the Earth's orbit and toss it around? It's like maybe they needed a catastrophic event. Who can tap into the mind of these alien creatures that are ping-ponging the moon around the universe? So I don't actually have too much of a problem with it. I can outline the science for you. But in the end, it's like, well, some higher power was at work, and I'm okay with that. If you want to invoke that to say this is why the Earth wasn't destroyed, the moon wasn't destroyed, why, an hour later they're so far away from the Earth, it's like, no, it would be years before they left the solar system. I see that eagle model over your left shoulder there.
Oh, it's
my!
It's vast. It's a 44-incher.
That's the one I think I've got that I haven't built yet.
It's
44. No.
It's a beauty.
I had like the 12-inch model. I have the 22-inch or something like that.
Okay.
That's nice.
Yeah,
I'll have to come visit.
It's fantastic. You're welcome anytime. Ever fancy coming to Wales?
Absolutely. Actually, I've been to Wales. I had quite a good time.
Yeah, it's beautiful here, if a little rainy. So you've
the
saved.
Food was a little different, but okay.
There's nothing wrong with the food here, Phil.
Except that it's unidentifiable on a menu. It's like, what part of the animal is this? Okay, don't tell me. All right, I'll just eat it.
Well, I promise if you visit, we'll go somewhere where there is identifiable food.
It's sort of a minimum requirement for me for food. I can point at it and go, yes, this is organic. Okay, I mean literally organic, carbon-based. Yeah,
yes,
scientific organic.
So you've saved yourself from fans going, oh, he's being really picky about the science by the higher power thing, which I love. I think that's important, and people maybe downplay that. What about if we lost the moon on Thursday on breakaway day?
Right.
What happens to the Earth?
It depends a lot on how this happens. If you want a singular explosive event that pushes the moon away, the radiation effects on Earth wouldn't be that bad because it was on the far side of the moon, which always faces away from the Earth. One problem is that, if it was on the far side, it would have just pushed the moon into the Earth. Maybe not. Actually, that depends a lot on the direction the moon was moving and where exactly this base was on the far side. I don't think it was ever actually stated. It just says the far side of the moon. Oh my gosh, unless it said the dark side of the moon. I don't even remember in Breakaway. I'll have to watch that again and see. That's a common conception. There's one side of the moon that always faces away from the Earth. That is the far side. But there is no dark side of the moon. There's, it's like the Earth. There's a daylit half and a dark half, and that changes all the time. But anyway, I digress. The biggest problem is that there's a gravitational influence on the Earth from the moon. If you were to basically remove the moon from the Earth, pull it away, the moon stretches the Earth. What we think of as tides is actually the moon stretching the Earth because gravity depends on distance. And one side of the Earth is closer to the moon than the other side. And so one side is pulled harder than the other side. It's a little more complicated than that, but this is a super, super condensed version of that. And so the Earth is a little bit egg-shaped instead of being a sphere. And if you were to pull the moon away, that force drops, and so the Earth would sort of rebound. If the moon were to be thrust out of Earth's orbit really rapidly, the Earth would very suddenly go from being egg-shaped to a sphere. And it's not like, the Earth is 8,000 miles across. The amount it's being, the solid Earth is being distorted by a couple of yards. And I'm using, imperial units. I could say meters and kilometers, whatever.
It's fine. Imperial's fine for this.
Okay. So it's not like the Earth is being pulled 100 kilometers out of shape and it would suddenly snap back and be cracked in half, something like that. But there could be earthquakes, maybe. It's very difficult to say if the moon causes earthquakes right now. There's been a lot of studies, and there's a very, very, very tenuous connection between the moon's gravity and earthquakes. So even if you made the moon disappear, even if the moon just was gone in a space warp, would the Earth snapping back cause earthquakes? I don't know. That might be an interesting question, an interesting scientific thing to pursue, just to see. A lot of times, you just do sort of a what if back of the envelope calculation and find out something kind of interesting and profound. So, they talked about in a later episode, earthquakes and devastating weather and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure it would be that bad. But we wouldn't have tides anymore. Some animals have their cycles tied to the phases of the moon.
Yep.
There are insects that breed at a certain month in the summer. I can't remember which, some sort of flying insect when the moon is full. So that would all go away. There could be some, possibly relatively minor effects that way. But overall, I think we'd probably be okay. It would just kind of suck not having a moon.
But nothing major, just more kind of a visual problem and tidal. Not so good for surfers.
Yeah, don't hold me to this, but I don't necessarily think it would be that bad. There may be something I'm not thinking of. I guess, there are tidal pools and there are other marine animals that depend on the tides for reproduction and that sort of thing. So that might be a thing. But as far as, devastating earthquakes, consequences like that, I don't think so. Actually, a lot of astronomers would be happy because when the moon is full, it's so bright, it lights up the sky. And you can't observe faint, distant objects when it's up. So a lot of astronomers would be like, thank God, we get an extra week of observing it now.
So bad for marine life, good for astronomers.
Yeah, bad for planetary scientists. I mean, we can go on and on. The moon is out there, and it's a pretty nice place to set up a base of operations for exploring the rest of the solar system. So, I'm kind of hoping we're still going to do that. Maybe in the next few years, we'll see somebody setting foot on the moon again. So, yeah, I still want it around.
Okay. With that in mind, that kind of, I feel like there's a slightly renewed interest in space with stuff like Elon Musk's new,
never heard of him.
The Falcon, that guy, nobody talks about him. He's never in the news or anything, but
yeah, right.
All of the stuff that he's doing, talk of Space Force.
Don't even get me started about that. Yeah.
Let's not talk about Space Force. But there is I'm pleased to feel that kind of sense of renewed interest.
Sure. It's science fiction come to life. I mean, SpaceX is now relatively routinely landing these first stage boosters again. And, that's the kind of rocket I grew up with. I grew up with Chesley Bonestell paintings, those silver darts sitting on the lunar surface, all those movies, Destination Moon and all of that. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, for that.
Yes.
I remember that movie very well when I was a kid watching that on TV. So
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. That won't work. You can't have an Earth on the other side of the sun.
Oh, Phil.
Sorry, we'd have known about it centuries ago. And it wouldn't be, left, right, reversed with our planet. It's a pretty trippy if you all haven't seen it, if anybody listened to this podcast, but when I tweet this on social media, there are going to be folks who probably haven't seen it. Go find it. It's kind of a head trip of
it's
a movie.
Fun movie. It really is.
But and you can see a lot of UFO and Space 1999 elements in it as well.
100%.
I don't even know what I was talking about now. Space Force and all that stuff. Yeah. So we have SpaceX landing these rockets. Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos's company, is also shooting up their rocket. It's going up, up into space, barely. It's going basically straight up and straight down, but they are very slowly and surely, step by step, building these rockets and testing them, and they'll be putting people in space in the next, handful of years.
Yeah,
and they're already working on their orbital rocket, the New Glenn, so that's a big deal that this is happening. Whether it's going to be done well, we'll see. This is all kind of new, and we all had shiny, spiffy hopes for all of this. And then, and then sometimes things happen where you go, maybe we should be a little more diversified in how we're doing this, because if you rely on one person to make sure everything's going right, that can have issues with it. But we have NASA, we have SpaceX, Blue Origin. There are other companies out there still, United Launch Alliance, all these different companies still building rockets, and that's just the U.S. European Space Agency is doing gangbusters. India is launching their own rockets. They put a probe around Mars on their first try. Nobody's ever been able to do that. Getting to Mars is really hard. Yeah. They launched the Mars orbiting mission, got it there, put it in orbit. It's doing great work. They're going to the moon. China is very serious about building space stations and going to the moon. It's a renaissance. Sorry, a renaissance.
You can say either. We're not having any arguments about U.S. English.
And I don't think I can say it's a renaissance, as y'all say, coming from Virginia. I don't know if I can use y'all and renaissance in the same sentence, but there you go, folks.
I'm glad you have.
I'm a renaissance Southerner. But yeah, so there's and the fact that you can watch this. SpaceX launched a rocket a couple of nights ago, and I watched it sitting here on my computer. Yeah. There's a huge resurgence in that. And, the idea of building a moon base is not so silly. No. And I don't know if they'll name it Alpha. They named the Shuttle Enterprise because of Star Trek fans. So you never know.
Well, yeah, Elon Musk quite regularly tweets Space 1999 clips and other bits and pieces. So it's my hope that at least a small proportion of the people who are involved in this renaissance or renaissance were partially inspired by watching Space 1999 as kids. I mean, I spent some time at NASA Goddard last year. They're head of heliophysics, a few other guys there. They've got Eagle posters on the wall. They claim went into that line of work because of Space 1999. So do you think we maybe can put a tiny claim to fame in there and say that Gerry Anderson may have inspired some of these people?
Oh, there's no doubt. I worked at Goddard Space Flight Center, or Goddard Space Flight Center, your wacky pronunciation as this theme continues. I worked there for actually many years. I was a contractor working on Hubble Space Telescope.
Oh, okay.
And you can't understate how important science fiction was to a lot of those folks. We were inspired by it as kids, and you see those posters up on the wall. I know on occasion people from science fiction came to visit. I know Jerry Ryan, who played Seven of Nine on Star Trek Voyager, came to visit, and she's a big science nerd. She's a dork. She loves forensic medicine and space science and all that kind of stuff. And she came to visit and was treated like royalty. And everybody was very excited. And it's because of that connection. Yeah. It's this connection between science fiction and science. Will Wheaton has talked about this as well, and I've given this a substantial amount of thought over the years. When you look at the actors from the 60s and 70s, Shatner and folks from Star Trek, and I bet it's true of Space 1999, although I know that a couple of Space 1999 actors really like science, but most of them were not science fiction fans. They were just actors. They got this job. It was a regular gig. They got their paycheck. They promoted the show or whatever, and Shatner's even talked about this. It's like, it was a job. It's just something I did. And now he's embraced it, either ironically or not. But the thing is, what happened was they inspired a generation of people to go into science and to go into acting, to love science fiction, like Will Wheaton, who played Wesley Crusher on Next Generation. Will is a huge science nerd and was inspired by that. And I was inspired by Shatner and all of those actors and Martin Landau. And so you have a sort of second generation of actors coming up who then liked science fiction. And so in this new wave of shows, starting around the time of Next Generation, but then also Battlestar Galactica, for example. that was one of the first science fiction shows to have a regular science advisor, Kevin Grazier, a friend of mine.
He was sent the scripts. Kevin, lovely chat.
Oh, you know Kevin? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sent the scripts and said, does this work? How do we make this work? We need this to happen. And he would come up with, I see, he's holding up a copy of Holly Weird Science. And that was co-written by, with a foreword by Jamie Paglia, who was the showrunner for Eureka. And Kevin was a science advisor on Eureka, and because they needed a science advisor on that show. There's a lot of science.
Yeah.
And a lot of the plots were based on it. And so you find out that, Kevin's talked about this, that a lot of the actors on that show were big science fiction fans. And Aaron Douglas, who played Chief on Battlestar, is an aficionado of science. I mean, he loves science. I met him at a con. I was giving a sort of a comedy astronomy talk, and he loved it. He was talking to me about it afterwards, and it's like, no, he likes the science, and you see that a lot more now. And I made a list one day of just like, how many actors do I know who dig science? And that list went on and on and on. Science fiction actors.
Yeah.
David Blue from Stargate Universe, just all of these folks. You can find them on Twitter. And again, Jerry Ryan and Robert Picardo, who played the doctor on Voyager, is part of the Planetary Society, which is an advocacy group for space exploration. So, this is for real. There's no kidding. I mean, this is the long way around to answer your question. A, because that's what I do, but two, that gives you the depth of how important this is. Science fiction is important. These aren't just silly stories. I mean, they can be, but you talk to any astronaut, any scientist, and say, what inspired you when you were a kid? And they'll say two things, looking through a telescope and seeing Saturn or the moon. That's a very common story. And the other one is the science fiction shows I watched as a kid.
Absolutely. Yeah, science is interesting and science fiction is cool. And if you don't agree, then you're probably misinformed.
Well, I can't argue with that.
I'm glad. Phil, I've absolutely loved this. I feel like I really want to revisit some more Anderson science with you, but our time is rapidly running out. If people want to find you online and see more of what you do, where can they find you?
Everywhere. I've been online since there was an online. If you type my name into Google, you'll come up. It's Phil Plait, Plait. I think you can find that in the show notes here. The easiest way is to go to about.me/Phil Plait, and I've got links to my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, my blog. I don't even know what other social media stuff I do these days. It's so hard to keep track of everything. But that's the best way to find me. And I will occasionally throw out the nerd tweet. And by occasionally, I mean, all the time. Between politics and pictures of my goats. Cause like I said, I live out in the middle of nowhere.
You got goats, Phil?
Yeah, I have goats and horses and.
Oh my, wow! This is like looking into the mirror. We've got pygmy goats and sheep and horses out there. So. Oh really? Well, yeah, you're in Wales, right? I think that's part of it's like a national law. Here's your sheep. You have to have sheep. Okay, how many goats do you have? Just 2 pygmies right now. 2 pygmies? Okay. Yeah, we have 2 pygmies and 2 dwarf Nigerians. Oh wow. Yeah. Gosh, we're going way off topic now. But yeah, I'm glad we have a shared love of science and animals. Phil, you've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Sure you would have loved this. And I expect you're going to get some Space 1999 tweets thrown at you, possibly some queries about how you possibly might blow the moon out of Earth's orbit. I hope so. And I hope I do get a chance to visit. I'm still looking. I think I see Daleks in the background there too. I'd love to talk to you about what it was like growing up in that environment and all of that, because that's very cool. Awesome. Well, maybe we'll have you back on in the future, Phil. But for now, thank you so much. You've been brilliant. Thank you. Nice work, Jamie. Well, Phil did all the work. I did nothing. We just chatted. Really interesting. He's just a really fascinating guy, and I really enjoyed our chat. And yet another Space 1999 fan. Yes. Who was completely awestruck, dumbstruck, dumbfounded, frightened by. Yeah, well, Dragon's Domain. Yeah. I know. It's interesting, isn't it? Even if you're not that au fait with the series as a whole, there are those images, those particular scenes that really do stick with you. And that thing with the, it's sort of like an eye, wasn't it? The big bright eye. Suck people in and
spit them out, chew them up and spit them up.
Yeah,
Extraordinary.
it terrified people. It made a real impression on kids at the time.
Right.
I think I did ask him in that if he thought that had negatively affected kids of his generation, but he didn't think so. Anyway, Phil, thank you so much. We'd love to have you back in the future.
Yeah.
I need to get him on to Terrahawks and other shows as
great,
well.
yes.
Especially as it's Terrahawks Day.
That's right, 10-10. Yeah, exactly right. That's good. And of course, you can listen to all our previous interviews just by listening to all our previous podcasts, which you could, there you go.
That is the simplest instruction ever, but you're right.
You can do that by heading to, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and just search for us.
Not Google Play Music, as I've discovered. We've been uploading to Google Play Music, but they don't actually allow UK-based podcasts yet for some bizarre reason. So if you've got that app, and we're hoping to get us through there, and you're listening now on YouTube or elsewhere, sorry, we're trying, but they won't let us do it.
Now, you see, I'm looking forward to the day when I can say, Alexa, play the Gerry Anderson podcast. So how do we make that happen?
Alexa next door.
Just set off your Alexa.
You actually, I think you can, but there's a podcast app on Alexa that I have to register. But actually, at the minute, you can install on your Alexa the Gerry Anderson News app.
Right.
And then that will put the latest Gerry Anderson news into your morning briefing.
Oh, really?
So if you want to do that, then
that's
just
nice.
search Gerry Anderson on the Alexa app. Store or whatever it is.
Great.
Put it in there.
Nice. Well, that also give people the latest cat news and pygmy goat news.
No,
just it's strictly Gerry Anderson
official
related.
stuff on the website.
Oh, I see. Official stuff on the website. Great. So yes, please do get in touch with us if you'd like us to read out your email. podcast@gerryanderson.co.uk. Don't forget to rate us, share us, review us, subscribe, and also take a little screenshot of your device as you're listening to us now. Pop it on Twitter. Hashtag us Gerry Anderson Podcast and let us know what you think. That'd be lovely.
Lovely. And also, to add on to your list of things to do, of which there are already many things,
there are.
I would love some Gerry Anderson podcast selfies.
Oh, right.
Because most podcast apps will play in the background, so you should be able to go into your camera app if you're listening on your phone, take us a selfie.
Great.
And maybe we'll do a wall of podcast listeners on the website.
Great. Yeah, like the sound of that. You're literally making this up as you go along.
Absolutely, yes.
No change there.
I'll probably regret that. Anyway, look, shall we go on to the next thing, the final feature of this episode?
Yeah, and it is possibly one of the most popular features of the entire podcast, let's be honest. It's the main reason people tune in.
Yeah.
It's to hear Chris Dale, and it's to see exactly what he's sat down in front of this week, in front of the randomizer.
Here he is.
Hi, Chris.
Where am I?
In the village.
What do you want?
Information.
Whose side are you on?
That would be telling. We want information. Information.
You'll get nothing out of me. No, sir, me neither.
By hook or by crook. We will.
Who are you?
The new number 2. The new number 2.
All right, cut it. Well, I've heard of method acting, but you take the coconut. What's got into you?
Oh, good grief. I'm so sorry. Yes, that was meant to be Marina's line, wasn't it? Oh dear. I probably should have mentioned that there'd be a slight problem with casting Marina in the Harlington Straker production of The Prisoner.
You see, she can't speak. She doesn't know how.
Well, that's a mess of useless information.
Get yourself a new agent, kid.
Oh, Paul, please don't be like that. Besides, I'm not actually her... Oh... I'm sorry, Marina. I'm still somewhat worse the wear for last week. Anyway, I know you're all right, but there's one person in this room that I know isn't going to take this well. Oh, dear. Gwent, honey, listen, I know you really wanted everyone to see you play number 2, but how about you make the randomizer selection instead, okay?
I'm delighted.
And Gwent, I'd really appreciate it if you could land us on something that isn't torchy.
If my word is my bond.
Oh, and I have full faith in you, of course. Right, what do we have today? Okay. Well, continuing with the randomizer's apparent return to its roots, we're back with Joe 90, and we're joining him for an Arctic adventure. Well, here we are, back with Joe 90, and almost immediately we have something new to talk about. Something that was introduced on Joe 90 that hadn't been used in previous Super Mario Nation series was a pre-title sequence, which I think was a really good idea. It made the shows feel much more like adult shows. You know, you get this kind of thing on most shows now, but at the time, in Britain, I think in America as well, a pre-titled sequence like this was usually reserved for grown-up TV, and I think it's a nice nod to the child audience to help them feel sort of respected, you know, make them feel a bit more grown up than maybe other children's shows would make them feel.
It is not one of ours.
This is another episode. It may even be the first episode, in fact, to use the idea of the Eastern Alliance as a villain in Joe 90.
Automatic Mayday set, sir.
Prepare to eject.
I'm kind of torn about this because on the one hand, it is nice to have a recurring adversary in this series, even though the Eastern Alliance only appeared in this episode, Attack of the Tiger, maybe even one or two more episodes where you could imply that it was them.
Okay. Get them out of here.
Set individual systems go.
And while I sort of respect Gerry Anderson's attempt to not pick on, say, the Russians as a baddie or the Chinese as a baddie, to not say those names, I'm not entirely convinced that having them all come together in one group as the Eastern Alliance to be the baddies in this series was an entirely good idea. And also a fairly grim opening here. We have the crew of this plane ejecting to certain death, pretty much certain death. I don't think there's any mention of them being rescued. And there's that kind of, that good luck moment just before the two pilots eject. It's very clear that they know they're not going to survive this. Oh, that's a lovely plane crash explosion there. Now, another reason I think the Eastern Alliance concept was a good idea is that it gives you a greater sense of scale of like the political landscape of this world, and it makes for a nice contrast when we go from that opening with the plane crashing and the Eastern Alliance watching them and all this, we've just lost some nuclear missiles in the Arctic Circle. This is serious stuff. The fate of the world is at stake. And then we cut to Joe and his dad in their cottage, completely oblivious to the situation. I love that contrast that this show does of, as I think Professor McLean said in the first episode, a combination of the old and the new. Okay, yeah, I've said before that I adore this opening title sequence, as I adore Stingray and UFO and most of the rest of them. Just something about that opening title sequence makes me happy. It just, this whole show plugs into my inner child in a way that the others don't necessarily.
The search for the 4 nuclear devices lost in the tragic crash of the B-107.
Yeah, tragic crash. We can confirm that the pilots are all dead in that case.
The fact that the aircraft crashed inside the Arctic Circle just 3 miles from the eastern sector prevented a major political incident.
That's good news.
The weather will remain bright.
Turn it off, Joe.
Yeah, it's good news that those pilots died in a considerate place.
Yes, Mrs. Harris. We intend to have a nice, relaxed day.
There's an interesting newspaper that Professor McLean is reading there. It's called the Astronaut Observer, but the headline is Red Arrow Test Tragedy. Colonel Casey to be replaced, which is obviously the newspaper that was being read on Tracy Island in Edge of Impact. I think that newspaper reappeared a couple of times in this show. There was also a newspaper from, I think the episode Splashdown was reused a few times.
Are you ready, Joe?
Yes, Dad.
Come on, then.
I only feel slightly ashamed, by the way, that I can recognise a prop newspaper's origins by the headlines.
We'll stop somewhere on the way and get a sandwich.
Sandwiches?
Not sandwiches? Oh no, anything but sandwiches. Yeah, this is Mrs. Harris, Professor McLean's housekeeper, who I think
don't know what they get up to, I'm sure.
Only appeared in 4 episodes, never contributed anything to the stories, and it's always seemed to me as a way to try to give Sylvia Anderson a role in the series, which unfortunately she didn't have a voice role in the series. Obviously she'd been Melody Angel in Captain Scarlet and of course Lady Penelope in Thunderbirds. This series, Joe 90, was very much a more sort of boys' own thing.
crash was only a few miles from the eastern section.
So it's rare that you even get any female guest characters at all in this show, much less more than one, which is a shame.
That bomb must be recovered. Is there any danger it'll detonate? That's virtually impossible.
Oh, that means in the Gerry Anderson universe, that means it's an absolute certainty, doesn't it? Yes. It's probably ticking down at this very moment.
One problem. Dr. Kelvin is nearly 70. He's too old.
Oh, ageist. No, that would not fly today. He'd need to be nearer 90. Nothing wrong with being 70. He can still go on missions if he's 70.
Yes. You say you're thinking of organizing an underwater Arctic expedition.
Yes, Doctor. We'd be glad of any help you could give us.
And you see that you're the head of a top-secret government agency that sometimes people know about and sometimes people don't know about, and you've come to see me. I think this is not entirely on the level.
It's going to help us record your brain pattern, Doctor.
Record my brain pattern? Oh, very good. I may be an old man, but I haven't lost my sense of humour.
Yeah, you definitely have if you're laughing at that joke. That joke cropped up a few times and was very rarely funny. I suppose in a way it's quite charming that people just respond to it as if it's a load of gibberish. I think the only time it was really genuinely funny was in Attack of the Tiger, where they used the line on Fearless Foley, who clearly thought Joe and his dad were both insane. I think that's the best way to respond to it, not to find it genuinely funny.
Where to now, Mr. Weston?
Back to the cottage, Joe. Get you brained up, and then the real assignment. Find that missing nuclear device.
I love that that's jargon in this show. We're going to get the small child brained up. Oh, it's so wrong, and yet so right. Now, I'm looking at this shot of the icebreaker moving across the Arctic Circle here, and I've got to say, and it's not unique to this episode, these sheets of ice, which are obviously resprayed pieces of polystyrene, I never found them entirely convincing in this or in other episodes, like, for instance, Noose of Ice is another one that uses great chunks of polystyrene, and none of it is really convincing, I think, because although it's got the right shape and the right texture, it doesn't look cold. There's no sparkle to it. This shot of the underwater complex, I think the ice works well with like the fish tank in front of it to sort of block out the to slightly distort the shot of the ice. And in fact, this shot of the underwater base here is quite interesting because it's made up of a number of pieces, recognisable props from Captain Scarlet. I think a large chunk of it was originally the Atlantica base model in Flight to Atlantica, but if you look closely, and this is only what I've spotted, I'm sure there's more under there, you have the top of the mini satellite from Shadow of Fear, the one that landed on Phobos, the bit with the smiley head, that's quite visible there. And you also have, very tiny, a model of the London car view, which, once you see it there, is you're never going to not notice it. It is like a sort of reunion for old Captain Scarlet props. Now here we have Joe off to recover the missile in a little mini submarine, and a lot of the guest vehicles in Joe 90, I think certainly there is a reason why very few of them became toys. And I don't think any of them are bad designs as such, it's just that they are more designed to be functional rather than attractive. It's it's not meant to look glamorous, it's not meant to look like something that could be turned into a toy. It's meant to look practical, and I think this does. It is a shame, though, that there's very few Joe 90 models made. Obviously, the Jet Air car and Sam's little car were produced in dinkies. Konami did a nice little model of the explosive truck from Colonel McLean. But this could easily become a model. And there's, I think, a few models in Joe 90 that could be adapted as toys. I'm not saying that I want Joe 90 toys, but I want Joe 90 toys. I don't have any. You know, even when I was a kid, I never had any of the Vivid Imaginations toys that came out at the same time. I kind of regret that now. I was looking at them on eBay recently, but far too expensive. Yeah, here we go. London Carview. Is that the bottom of...
Well, only 3 more weeks
in
this icebox.
There's what looks like possibly the bottom half, or at least a piece of the Sun probe. Could be wrong.
I got it all worked out.
Nothing to do?
Yes, Commander.
Then get on with it.
I do like these scenes of the radar technicians in the Eastern Alliance base just chatting to each other and killing time, because it must be very boring for them. It's really nice character stuff, and that was something that this show was always really good at. Not just strong characterizations for the regulars, but also for the guest characters and even minor characters.
You'd better turn back. If you get into difficulties, we won't be able to help.
No chance.
You won't be able to help him even if he gets into difficulty now. As far as I know, you don't have another submarine. You don't have anyone else with his experience. What else am I seeing? Oh, yeah, this is lovely music, by the way. I think I just noticed as well in the undersea base there some of the pressure domes from Avalanche.
Drink it quick in case the commander decides to come back.
He won't.
Oh, this is lovely as well. You've got the 2 radar technicians. They are clearly sat in an underwater section of the base because there's a great big wall of fish in front of them. That's a lovely touch. And it's always nice to see things like that included on the puppet stages, because it must have been hard enough to do on the model sets. It must have been 10 times more difficult to do on the puppet stage, include a tank with fish in.
I've located the device. It's lodged in a crack in the rocks, but it shouldn't be too difficult to pick
Now,
up.
this is the first episode of Joe 90 that I've come to since my randomizers for Trial at Sea and Child of the Sun God were first aired on the earliest podcasts. I should explain that I record these quite some time in advance, so I don't know when this is going to go out, but for me at the moment it's late August. I don't know where you are in your time zone, but that's where I am. And so it's a good chance for me to address some of the comments that Jamie made in response to my earlier reviews of Joe 90, specifically how much he dislikes the Joe 90 character for being such a know-all, for telling everybody what to do and all that stuff. My response to that would be, it could be a lot worse. For starters, he is meant to know everything anyway. That's the whole point of giving him these brain patterns, is to make him an expert, a specialist on all sorts of things. So of course he's going to be telling people what to do. And if you look at scenes where he isn't brained up, he often isn't saying much. And when he does throw in an idea, people often tell him to shut up. I can think of like International Concerto and Lone-Handed 90 as 2 examples of that. So he isn't treated as a prodigy all the way through. And I also think, for anyone who doesn't like the character, imagine if the Century 21 team had done what had been done on all of the previous Super Mario Nation series that had featured a child character, and they had got a woman to do the voice. Now, nothing against Sylvia Anderson, Christine Finn, any other women who did child voices in those shows. I don't think there were any others. But it never sounded convincing. But it sort of fit in the world of Thunderbirds and Stingray, where you didn't have these correctly proportioned puppets. There wasn't this huge drive for ultra-realism like there is in Joe 90 and Captain Scarlet. So I think we get away very lightly with having Len Jones portray this character. I mean, just imagine if that was, if it was the voice of Jimmy Gibson coming out of this puppet. I would have issues with this show as well. As it is, I think what we get is not perfect, but I think it is a lot better than people would give it credit for. And yeah, Joe could be a lot more annoying. Personally, I've never found him annoying. Like I said, he's supposed to be an expert, so he behaves like an expert, and when he doesn't have that knowledge, he doesn't behave like an expert. He is just a regular little boy.
What's that?
And I think that's a difficult balancing act, but it all worked very well.
2 other traces, and they're heading right for him.
Base to Joe 90. We picked up 2 underwater vehicles about 4 miles from your position. They're probably enemy killer subs. Get out of there fast.
Not till I get what I came for. Out.
And that sort of is a good example of the fact that he is, a Gerry Anderson hero worthy of the name, the same as Scott Tracy and Captain Scarlet and all the rest of them, because it's not just a question of having the experience. He is genuinely brave in his own right anyway. That's lovely.
3 miles, still closing.
Unfortunately, we have these scenes of Mac and Shane and Sam just sort of fretting about him, which were never quite as effective as having them out in the field alongside him. That was always better. Now, having said that the submarine is a very good design, and I still stand by that, but seeing these thin, spindly arms holding this torpedo thingy, that part of it is less than convincing. It looks like it's got a knife and it's going to try and stab somebody. Or maybe that's just me. Gosh, never has staring at a screen looking at radar blips been so funky. I love the music in this show. Now, we've got some more underwater scenes here where you can see they've taken the time to treat the polystyrene and make it look more real. It's got moss growing on it. There are different shades in the colours. It's not just polystyrene. The stuff on the surface is really obviously polystyrene. It has no frostiness. It has no weight to it. Underwater it looks lovely. I just wish they'd taken the time to do a bit more on the surface, just a little bit more. Still looks better than most other shows have made around this time, but... Now this music that's playing at the moment, this returned a few times in Joe 90. It was also used in Space 1999, I think, in Collision Course. But it was also used, and this is a very personal memory, when I was at university doing a film. We were making a short film, like 5 minutes. It was about somebody who suddenly found themselves all alone. There was nobody around, and there was no dialogue, so we needed some really good music. I went raiding my soundtrack library, which at the time was basically just Gerry Anderson stuff, and I brought in all of the spookiest music I could find, including that piece. And that piece was chosen to be the soundtrack for this film. And luckily nobody asked me where it came from, because if they had, I would have felt mildly embarrassed to say to my university friends, "Oh yeah, this is a piece of music from Joe 90.
You've done
what? Of course now I don't care. But at the time, it's not the coolest thing to own up to.
I think you're a winner, Mr. Weston.
Joe. A winner? Oh, that's right. W-I-N, winner. Very good. That's very good, Joe, yeah.
Once again, I love David Healy. I love Shane Weston as David Healy. That's just... And again, it shows the evolution of the humour in this show, that Joe can make an obviously awful joke. His dad and Sam just go, "Oh," and Shane is like, "Yes, I'm putting that in my big book of jokes." Well, that was Arctic Adventure. Once again, as with, I think, about 60 or 70% of Joe 90, perfectly decent, perfectly serviceable, nothing spectacular, but a solid entry that once again shows the strength of the series. And as with everything Joe 90 related, I really enjoy it. I apologise if people are sort of hoping that I can tear it to pieces. There are very few episodes of this show that I don't like. I think maybe there are 2 that I don't like, and even then, they're just they're not great. But this is a nice little excursion to the Arctic Circle, which was I don't think Century 21 did many sort of icy, snowy, polar-related episodes. There was usually one ice episode, one snow episode. So we've now had our ice-related episode. We will hopefully one day get our snow episode, but that'll be another time. Bye-bye.
Another Joe.
Yes, another Joe. He's getting them thick and fast, isn't he?
But it does make me actually want to go and watch the episode. I haven't seen Arctic Adventure for a long time, so I'm gonna go and watch it.
Well, we could do that, couldn't we?
Hey, we could do it. Yes,
we could do that after we
finish
finish it. We could watch it.
Fine. Okay. So
it's a date. That's about as good as it'll get, Jamie.
Yeah,
so be grateful.
Fair enough. Well, I'm very grateful for that.
I should just like to point out that I've done almost the entirety of this podcast with a warm dog's nose in my hand.
Is it wet?
Yes.
Brilliant. That's Ernie, my little Jack Russell, who's been quite annoying
both of us
throughout this podcast. Anyway, look, Richard, that's it.
Yeah,
so,
it must be, yeah.
You've done all the stuff about subscribing and all that stuff.
They know all that.
I guess the most important thing you can do right now is make sure you're liking and following all of the Firestorm pages. Firestorm HQ on Facebook, Firestorm HQ on Instagram, Firestorm HQ on YouTube, FirestormHQ.com as the website, and SF9 Twitter. No,
you've got to start all over again now. You have to start all over again.
No. And SF9, SF9 Firestorm on Twitter.
Great.
Please do follow all those things. Like what we're doing. Spread the word.
Yes.
Because it's going to get the series out there quicker.
Oh, absolutely.
And make and just show the world that people want more puppets and models.
Yeah.
And as we keep seeing every single week, kids love this stuff.
Yeah.
So if we can make some brand new Gerry Anderson puppet shows for them, it's going to make the world a better place, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And of course, we often hear from people saying, "Oh, I didn't know it was happening, and I didn't get on board with the Kickstarter, and so on and so forth." Well, listen, get on board now because there's some really exciting stuff happening. You don't want to have to kick yourself again.
Yeah. See, the dog's very happy. That's the wagging tail you can hear. Yeah, Mike's picking that up. Brilliant. Thank you, Ernie. And on that note, should we go away?
I think we ought to. The dog needs to be let out. We need to watch the Joe 90.
We're going to watch Arctic Adventure. Have a good week, everyone. Goodbye.
See you next time. Bye.
Stage 1 complete.
Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
Episode 14. You excited, Richard?
I'm very excited. I cannot wait.
And can you try not to squeak the chair around?
Well, it's not me that's squeaking the chair, is it? It's the chair that's squeaking.
It sounds like... Well, if you don't move, then it won't squeak. Now, what does Big Rat stand for, Richard? Do you remember?
Bionic, integrated...
No.
Biological...
No.
Brain, interface, impulse generator...
Record and transfer.
Okay.
Is cool music.
That is good, isn't it?
Arctic Adventure. Stop squeaking!
I'm trying not to squeak. Off we go.
Here we go. Oh, the sting. Century 21 sting is so cool.
Yeah, we like that. Oh, I've got a dog on my lap now.
Perfect. We can really settle in. Oh, look at that.
Oh.
Isn't that a great snowy scene?
Pardon?
Isn't that a great
Sorry, I
snowy
couldn't hear you over
the squeaking chair. Stop.
Sorry, I'm sorry.